Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to our Vine Connections live Facebook wine webinars. We are back today with an amazing winemaker joining us, Luis Reginato, all the way from Mendoza. Hola, Luis. How are you?
I'm very pleased to be here and talking a little bit about Mendoza and specifically one region called Gualtallary, which is very, very special. And I will be explaining a little bit how we define that region and what is special there and what makes the wines special and highly recognized today in the world.
Yes, so Luis is the head winemaker for both Luca and La Posta wines coming from Argentina. We did a webinar recently with Laura. We talked about Luca and La Posta. And what's really exciting about today is that Luis especially specializes in agronomy and viticulture. And in the world of wines from Mendoza, Luis has done a lot of the groundwork of really progressing the research and investigation for soil studies and climate studies, and really officiation of certain appellations in Argentina and Mendoza specifically. So when we talk about boots on the ground work and who's moving that movement forward, Luis has been a main role in that. So we're going to talk a lot about just high elevation wines in general and why that's important in the theme of Mendoza. And specifically, we're going to dive in and zoom into Gualtallary. And Gualtallary has really been evolved to be one of the Grand Cru, if you will, sites of Mendoza and the Uco Valley. And we're going to taste two wines from Luca, the Luca G Lot for Gualtallary, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So we've got a lot to dive into today, Luis, and I'm very excited. And I think before we start going into the high elevation wines, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background of how you got into winemaking and what your career has been like working in Mendoza.
Okay. First, this story started with my grandparents. They were immigrants from Italy, and they planted vineyards when they came in the First World War. Then my father is also a winemaker, so he's now 87 years old. So has been many years making wine. So I grew up in the vineyards and between vineyards and wineries, and it's really where I feel comfortable and what I enjoy to do. It's not something he forced, like he didn't encourage me to follow his steps. It was something that I really enjoy, and mostly I would say the vineyards, the nature, being in the mountains, living in the rhythm of the nature, like, the vineyards. Now here we are getting into winter. It's the pruning season, everything is very slow. Then the springtime when it's the bud break and a new season starts. Then the summertime when the grapes get ripe, the fall when you pick the grapes, and it's every round it take a year, and it's a good rhythm of living, in my opinion. So it's something that I enjoy a lot, and when I talk with colleagues and my team, it's something that with the years, I've been making wine for 20 years. I started with Luca, almost 20 years ago. So it's something that I don't consider today a job. It's like something that I enjoy. It's like I don't know, like a hobby or something that you love to do or love to. I enjoy going out every day to see the vineyards, talk with the growers, make the wine, and etc. So being here, talking about the product we make, and every time I listen to people enjoying the wine and feeling, pleasure when they drink the wine is something very made me feel very happy.
Well, it's so apparent when you spend time with you, Luis, in the vineyard. I always say my favorite story is that you were the first person to ever teach me about viticulture and what a life of a vine looked like when I was living in Mendoza. At what point for you, when you started learning about winemaking, or maybe you started with vineyards and it went to winemaking, what really sparked your passion for learning about the vineyard first? And specifically in Mendoza, what made you really focus in on doing actually more scientific research with the wines and the vineyards from Mendoza?
I think when I started working for the family, for the Catena family, it was in 1999, before I got my degree. I'm an agricultural engineer. And at that time, Argentina was just starting to export wine. We had a very strong, and we still have a very strong domestic market, a very strong domestic consumption of wine. So a very little amount was exported at that time. And we were starting to develop the quality in the wines and making wines that I would say better wines with better quality, managing the vineyards, bringing technology for the vineyards, managing the vineyards with the quality, having the quality as a goal, producing less quantity and more quality, controlling the irrigation, pruning better the vines. So I think the first passion was to how could I help to produce better grapes and they make better wines. Was like and Nicolas Catena, he has been always encouraging all the team, right? And today Laura, but Nicolas always trying to reach 100-point wines, and it was something that when I started 20 years ago, was like a dream, and something that really at that time I didn't believe that we could get that one day, and we did it. And we have had many wines now with 100 points, and it has been like a journey, and improving the quality, doing a lot of research, understanding what we have, the different parcels, the different lots, like the lots we use for Luca Chardonnay and Luca Pinot Noir, and understanding how the elevation and how the microclimates that we have in the mountains affect the grapes, the quality, and then we can make different styles of wines. So I think that my first passion was to be in a team and in a family that believed in quality, had a dream to produce wines that could compete with the best wines in the world, and so be part of that. And they support a lot the education. So I've been traveling everywhere in the world, in France, in Australia, in the US, learning, and I think we could harvest now the results, right? So I think that resumed my first passion with the wine.
I love it. I think it speaks to such an important story and a pivotal turning point for Mendoza. And that term of to make good wine, you need to have good grapes. You have to have the grapes first before you make the wine. And that shift towards focus on the vineyards was a big factor in really the 90s, like you mentioned, for Mendoza. And how I always explain it is that, in different areas of the world for winemaking, there are different ways to get cooler climate if that's what you're searching for, and different soil types. And really the main way to do that in Mendoza is going up in elevation in the Andes. So tell us more about, just in general, when you're talking high elevation vineyards in Argentina, what are the main factors that come into play that directly affect how a vineyard grows? at a lower elevation vineyard versus a high elevation vineyard? What are the main differences there?
So the first search when we started to plant in high elevation was cool temperature, right? We go up 100 meters, the temperature is 1 degree Celsius less. So that was the first idea, and it's true. And the idea was to find places with where we could grow grapes that reach the ripeness with more acidity and less sugar. And we got that. But something we didn't know was the effect of the sunlight intensity. Because, for example, in Gualtallary, and sorry because I know it's a difficult word, but it's a native name that means the mountain summit, and it's from the Huarpes, the natives live in Mendoza. And it's difficult, I know. So in Gualtallary, when Nicolas planted this vineyard in the 90s, and nobody was planting there, there were just a few farms of walnuts, and that's it, and maybe apricots. He was searching cool temperature, but then we discovered this effect of the sunlight intensity. If you want, we can start showing the images we have. Absolutely. So I can explain the appellation while the people can see the images, and it's easier. Okay. Because well, I told you the first thing we discovered was the effect of the sunlight intensity. When we moved there and we started to make wines from those vineyards, and this was more or less when I started in 99, 2000. We were making wines that score 90 points, and that was the goal, and that was what we were getting. When we started to produce those grapes and make wine from those, we started to get 93, 94, 95 points. It was like a step ahead in terms of quality and recognition. And then when we started to work more in detail with the soil and we found that in these areas, the soil is not the same, change a lot from one place to the other, just because the geology that is the origin of the soils, and can change a lot in short distances. And we make wines, microvinification from the different parcels. We made a ranking. We started to separate parcels that produce a higher quality from basically soils that have a pretty thick layer of limestone, and then we started to get 97, 98, and we finally got 100 points. So it has been a lot of research. Do you have the images, Lizzie, that we can share?
So what we're starting with is the zoomed out view of the world, and we're zooming into specifically Argentina, Mendoza. Within Mendoza, there's an area called the Uco Valley, and Gualtallary sits at the northern part in Tupungato, and just about at 5,000 feet elevation. So now we're zooming in on your outline of the actual area of Gualtallary, kind of the little triangle. And specifically what's important to note in your story too is that these vines were really pioneered by Luca and by the Catena family in the 90s. So it's relatively recent when this all happened. And something that we put on the screen too, Luis, is the Winkler index, and how that, temperature gauge is really important. When you're comparing to other places in the world, there are parts of Gualtallary that equate to temperatures in Burgundy or Champagne, which are very cool regions in the world. So what we're seeing now is just your outline of Gualtallary and the different sections within it. Tell us more about how you divide the area tell us the general size of Gualtallary and then how you divide the different sections.
Well, Gualtallary is, first of all, is a district in Tupungato County in the Uco Valley. Uco Valley is a valley in the west of Mendoza. You have to think that Mendoza is a pretty big province, but just 3% we can do agriculture in 3% of the surface because we don't have enough water to irrigate more than that. And a big part of the county are big mountains. So, Gualtallary, this small county in Tupungato, is an alluvial cone. So it's the reason it looks like a triangle. It's an alluvial cone. That means that all the soil there was transported by water. There is a river called Las Tunas. And this river many years ago was much bigger after the last glaciation and covered all this triangle. And the water deposited there different material coming from the Andes. Basalt, that is a volcanic rock. You will see, if you have the picture of the vineyard, you will see the Tupungato volcano that give us those rocks. We have also granite, so different material, also limestone. So this river collected all these materials from the mountains, went out of the mountains and spread all this material in this cone. So it's an alluvial cone, Gualtallary. But then happened, there is a different fault, different compared to the fault that created the Andes Mountains, and smaller, that affected a side of this triangle and elevated some hills. So all the area around the hills preserved the calcium carbonate, the limestone. And going more to the south of Gualtallary was the area where the water was still running and washed out all the limestone. So this parcel, the Gilot, is very close to the hills. I would say in the small hills, not the Andes, in an area that preserved the calcium carbonate, as you could see in the pictures that I sent you. And we found that these areas with this calcium carbonate give to the grapes a special balance between the water availability or the water access, because it was like a sponge, but also there is some saltiness associated with the limestone that give to the wine more flavor, more texture. So what most of the people call minerality, I think is more a combination between the acidity of the cool climate and some phenols in the grapes that develop in these areas with more limestone. Also, I told you before something we found, because it's not only the temperature. Where we have the G lots is Winkler region 2, similar to Côte-Rôtie in France, or some years in Bordeaux. So it's pretty cool area. But it's very dry compared to those regions, right? It's much drier. And we have around 330 days of sunshine. So very few days are cloudy. And when you go at this elevation, that is almost 5,000 feet, you get an extra sunlight intensity. And this sunlight produce grapes with thicker skin. The grapes produce a thicker skin as a defense. In the case of these two varieties, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, we try to avoid the sunlight because it's too strong, and Chardonnay can get sunburn, even if it is very, very cool climate, but the sunlight is very strong. So we manage the vineyard trying to have a little bit thicker canopy that keep the clusters in the shade and getting just some flashes of light. Pinot Noir, the same. Pinot Noir is very delicate grape. The skin is very delicate. So we keep a canopy a wider canopy with more leaves protecting the clusters. In other varieties like Malbec, for example, or Cabernet Franc, those, they like a lot the sunlight, don't get burned, and produce very massive muscular wines. And going back a little bit to Luca and the story, you know, Luca is the oldest son of Laura Catena. And when we started this project with Laura, the idea was to make wines that were not only Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon from Argentina, right? We have a Malbec, we have a Cabernet, Malbec, Cabernet Franc blend, but we also have a Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Syrah. And the idea was to make very small productions. These are very artisanal wines from parcels that produce a lot of quality. So Luca Syrah have this very special story of the producer that made a double selection of Syrah from France. And Luca Malbec are very old vines. It's a blend from 3 to 5 different producers that we have in the Valley, with vineyards that are in average 50 years old. And this Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the only lots that come from Laura's father vineyard, because also we wanted to work with old vines, but starting a winery, we had to plant vineyards and wait 40 years to get old vines, right? So we started to work with growers, but the only varieties that I couldn't find growers that produce high quality, or the quality we wanted to have for Luca, were Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. I couldn't find a place with higher quality than this vineyard in Gualtallary. So since the beginning, and today Gualtallary is a more recognized region in the world because many wines came out with high score from this appellation. But Luca was the first winery to make a single vineyard Chardonnay and a single vineyard Pinot Noir from Gualtallary. So today we have a collection of wines since 1999 of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from this appellation, and well, the wines are amazing how they age, and we trust in this region since the beginning, and we are now proud and very happy to still having these parcels and have the good luck that Laura has. You know, her father has this vineyard in this place. So this is more or less the story. I could also talk a little bit about the clones of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir that we have.
I would say one pause before we move on, Luis. I think you hit so many important points just to reiterate for takeaways. One, just with talking about high elevation in Mendoza, really two main things to remember. First, you know, people think Mendoza, it's on the rain shadow of the Andes, it's in a desert, super high sunlight intensity. You think, how can you grow anything there? But important to remember the irrigation off the snowmelt of the Andes is really what irrigates the vineyards. And the two main factors you're getting with high elevation in a desert is you're getting cooler temperatures as you go up, but you're also gaining higher sunlight intensity. And I think exactly like you said, that is a very key factor that winemakers and viticulturists from Mendoza have to take into consideration. That is not the same throughout the rest of the world. It's very specific to Mendoza. Two is exactly what you said with the pioneering element of the vines for Luca for Gualtallary, and really opening this appellation up for the rest of Mendoza to explore high elevation near 5,000 feet, as well as these varietals that really no one had been planting vineyards like this before because no one had the terroir or the temperatures to really make a high quality Chardonnay or Pinot Noir. So that, synergy between the terroir plus these varietals made Luca that pioneer and a continued quality producer of these varietals up until today. So I love showing G-Lot wines from Luca, the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay, because of that reason. They were the first to be there, and they've continued to show what these varietals, which are very well-known varietals across the world for some of the best wines in the world, what these can do in the terroir of Mendoza. And again, it's all from the grassroots work you've done, understanding how Gualtallary was formed, what factors come into play with growing a vineyard there, and how to make quality wine from it. So I agree. Let's start tasting the wines. Let's start with the Chardonnay, and tell us what these blocks are like that make the Luca Chardonnay, and how you approach growing the grapes, and then what wine do you envision when you're growing, and how does that make it into the bottle?
Well, I was telling the different clones we have. First, Nicolas planted a vineyard in Tupungato, but in lower elevation. It's 1,000, is almost 3,500 feet. Mm-hmm. And he planted different selections of Chardonnay from Dijon, different clones of Chardonnay and Pinot Noir with different rootstocks. So after 10 years, he planted Gualtallary, and he planted the clones that better suited to the area. So there was a previous work in Tupungato, not at the elevation of Gualtallary, but still in Tupungato at 1,300 meters, 1,200 meters. So, and that job I think was very important because the clones' behavior is very different. So we had, I just wanted to mention that we did a previous experience at lower elevation in the Uco Valley, and from that experience we planted Gualtallary with the clones that we think are the best for the area. Mm-hmm. About the style, we, since the beginning, also with Laura and with Nick from Vine Connections, when we started to make these wines, you have the Burgundian style, like the Burgundy Chardonnay, and you have the Napa or California Chardonnay, right? These are like the two different styles. And for Pinot Noir, it's kind of similar. You have Sonoma and you have Burgundy. And the idea here was to make something, I think, in the middle, like wines with his body, with his weight. You can feel the oak flavor, but with more acidity and less alcohol and less battery compared to most of the Chardonnay in California. And that is was the region. A very important part of that is the appellation and the lot. And part of it is the time when we pick the grapes. We pick relatively early to have low alcohol and high acidity. And also, I think the fruit expresses better when you pick earlier. And being very respectful with the use of oak. We aged 1 year in French oak barrels, and it's just 30% new. And that was since we started with that percentage. We could make wines with more oak flavor, more present, but it was not something we want to have in our wines. We wanted to have wines more transparent with the place where the grapes are grown. I think you said, I think the quality and the most important thing here are the grapes and the place where they come from, more than the oak or any other additive.
It's exactly how when I present Luca Chardonnay, it's so funny. That's literally the description I use, is that there's kind of two main camps of Chardonnay drinkers in the world. and that is more of a Burgundian, leaner, more acid-driven style. And then there's a more California fruit, oak-forward, heavier palate for Chardonnay. And Luca Chardonnay just kind of toes the middle line so well. And I love it because no matter which kind of party you're working with or tasting with, they find elements that they really align with. And it's a new experience of Chardonnay for them.
Yeah, I've been many times in the US, people saying that, no, I don't like Chardonnay, I don't like Chardonnay. When they taste Luca Chardonnay, they say, oh, I like this one.
I like Chardonnay. I completely agree. Exactly, we're tasting the 2018s today. The acidity on these wines, Luis, is so beautiful, and it makes the finish so long. So you talked about the temperature for sure, but specifically the Chardonnay, are these more planted on the limestone and calcareous soils versus the Pinot Noir, or what are the soils?
No, both have a pretty similar soil. This is the Gilot is the highest part of the vineyard. Was the first planted, and when Nicolas planted this area, this first block, everybody told him that he was crazy because it was going to be too cold to ripe grapes, and even very risky for frost, because this is very it's a border. And then if we could grow the grapes, then we could not maybe ripe the grapes. So he planted the early ripening varieties, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. The soil here is very similar. It's very, in both varieties, very similar. There are like patches with a more shallow soil and more and deeper soil. Because Gualtallary, you have three different layers. One is sand in the top that was deposited more recently by the wind. Then you have the limestone, can be 1 foot to 3 feet depth. And then you have round rocks covered with limestone. So this first layer of sand can be, there is a variation between 20 centimeters and 40, 50 centimeters. So something like this, or like, but then the rest is similar. Here is, and it's a small block. I mean, this Luca Chardonnay, Luca Pinot Noir, we produce about 2,000 cases of each. So it's a very small production.
Totally.
So, no, the soils are very similar. I send you pictures too. The different layers of soil.
I think the when you go to Gualtallary and when you go to the Gilot, and you're able to see its juxtaposition of just the landscape, but then really, I mean, the word calicata in Spanish means soil pit. And so the amount of calicatas that have appeared over the last 15 years, I think is tremendous in Mendoza. And to really see the diversity and the complexity of soil that you can find because of the geology of the Andes and how they formed, I don't think that level of understanding or research had really been done before. And I always try to emphasize that when I'm just telling people more about wines from the Andes, is that the Andes is one of the most amazing geological formations in the planet. And so think about how much you can geek out about geology of other wine regions in the world. Man, you can't get more of a mosaic than vineyards at the foothills of the Andes Mountains. So I'm so grateful that you've done research like this, because it's really showing what level of detail is in these vineyards.
Complexity, yes. Yeah. Well, Gualtallary, this alluvial cone, didn't mention, but it starts at 3,300 feet. Is the base, the bottom, and that is region Winkler 3, like Napa Valley. From 3, oh, it's difficult to translate to feet, but it's 3,300 feet to, let's say, 30 7, something like that, 150. So that is the base of the triangle, and it's Winkler 3. But then from 1,300 meters to 1,500 meters is Winkler 2. So we have different weather stations that measure and register and record the temperature for years. So it's the way we can separate. So it's Winkler 2. And then we have also a vineyard. Luca has a vineyard that is over 1,500 meters. And it's Winkler 1, like Champagne or Burgundy. So even into Gualtallary, there are different areas. And we are working on showing them separately. Where you have Winkler 1 and 2, is the top of the triangle. They are pretty similar, the soil, kind of. When you go to the base, Winkler 3, you have 3 very different types of soils. One is pure rock, the other is has a little bit more limestone, and the other is like a dune, it's pure sand. So talking about diversity and complexity, I'm talking about one area called Gualtallary into the Uco Valley that has in total 3,000 hectares, 3,400 hectares. So it's small. And you have this diversity. And something very, very important is the sunlight intensity. And again, we are studying, and something that we always pick my attention when I travel and I see research from different areas, like in California. Usually you measure and this is very deep, very, very technical, no? But you measure the pressure in the vines to see how stressed are they for water when you make a water restriction close to harvest. And always in California, you get very, very low pressure in the vines. If I do that kind of stress, the vines lose the leaves here. And it looks like the reason is the sunlight. The sunlight intensity works as an extra stress for the vines. So even with more water, they feel more stress for the sunlight intensity.
Wow.
So, in California, you have more humidity, you have some fog, and it's more moisture in the air, so lower elevation. So it's a very different climate compared to Mendoza. So the sunlight affects the vines. The effect is very important. It's a very important factor in the ripeness of the fruit, the polyphenol content, and it's something we are studying more and more.
Luis, this is why this sort of conversation is so important, because I think so often people like to kind of generalize about certain wine regions and say, oh, wines from Argentina are X, or wines from Mendoza are X, kind of clumping everything into one certain style or expression. But when you really start to zoom in and start to understand these regions from a more technical standpoint and have the wines connect to that story, there's no way you can say that all wines from Mendoza are the same. Or even you can't even say wines from Gualtallary are the same as San Carlos or from Los Chacayes, all these different subregions within Mendoza and specifically the Uco Valley. So it's really important because people really haven't had access to the information to have context and conversation points to really understand that diversity is a real theme in the context of terroir in Mendoza, and these are the reasons why. The Gualtallary is such a great example. You have 3 Winkler index zones in one area. That is wild, and it's only 3,000 hectares big. That's
but it's very. I mean, the slope is pretty deep. That's the reason you go up very quickly, and the temperature change a lot. And yeah, I remember when I think was close to 2004, something like that. And a journalist from the US visited Mendoza, and his name is James Molesworth. At that moment, he works in Wine Spectator. He was covering Argentina.
Yep.
And he came to visit, and talking with him, everybody was showing at that time Malbec from Mendoza, Malbec from Mendoza, Malbec from Mendoza. They were all Malbecs from Mendoza. Maybe some people say, well, this is from Valle de Uco, which is a huge valley. Not huge, but pretty big and diverse. So talking with him, I told him, I mean, there is a big diversity in Mendoza, big diversity in the Uco Valley. There are appellations, sub-appellations, and big diversity. And that was the moment when I started with Laura Catena to develop this idea to work and do research, separating the different areas, like Gualtallary, or can be Paraje Altamira. I think was the first work where we work well with a lot of research behind. Los Chacalles, El Cepillo, all appellations that deliver a lot of quality and are different. So today, you can explain, and more the journalists and some consumers, more and more, they, at least here in Argentina, people, oh, they say, Los Chacalles, this is very good. You know, Gualtallary, or this is the famous one, or Paraje Altamira, these are big wines. So people now is know more and more, and when they come to Mendoza, they want to go to Altamira, they want to go to Gualtallary, they want to visit all these smaller appellations, and it's very important. And for me, at that time, wineries were showing Malbec from Mendoza that cost $9 retail, and Malbec from Mendoza that cost $100 retail. And it's Malbec from Mendoza, and what's the difference?
No.
Of course, the quality, but now we can explain, well, this is a vineyard that is in eastern Mendoza with lower, higher yield, warmer, and this is from Gualtallary, limestone soil, this elevation, this Winkler. So we can explain better the places and the differences, and they have been visiting the areas, the vineyards, and so I'm very happy to be part of this little bit of this.
It's a huge evolution. It's huge steps forward. And the wines play a key part of it, because you can have all the research you want, but the wines need to pair with that to tell the story. Luis, when we dive into Luca Pinot Noir, when you either make or taste Luca Pinot Noir, what are the main characteristics you look for that really defines Luca Pinot Noir in the world of Pinot and the world of Pinot from Mendoza?
Well, I feel some, I think if you can define, also like in Chardonnay, where you can say for Pinot Noir, this is more Sonoma or this is more Burgundy. I think if you put Luca Pinot Noir in the middle, I think it's a little bit more close to Sonoma. Like more rounder and maybe less acidity with the Pinot Noir from Burgundy. But still you can get some fungus and some forest floor, like wet leaves in the forest.
A sort of earthiness and savoriness to it, but the core of the palate has that beautiful fruit presence to it, with a really, really fine tannin, almost more like a little bit of a tea tannin that I love looking for in Pinot Noir.
Yeah, Pinot Noir is a variety that has a pretty. People sometimes get confused and think that because it's light in color, it's light in body, but it's not. Pinot Noir has tannins and has structure and has acidity, so has a big backbone between the acidity and the tannins. Then in color, has less color because it's the varieties like that. And I love Pinot Noir and I love Luca when you can age this wine 3 years, 4 years, ideally 10. These wines gain quality, gain complexity, and develop layers. the famous layers of flavors. Even if you open the bottle and you maybe half hour before you drink it, and you leave it in the glass, and you smell the wine, and then you wait and leave the minutes go and smell again, the wine is changing.
I always say the most fun unicorn wines to try, which are, you know, wines that are rarely found, or, you know, just by chance you happen upon them. Either people that have cellared some Luca, Chard, or Pinot, or you find them on a menu with an older vintage. Like, get the bottle. Yeah. It is an excellent decision. And when we go to Argentina, Mendoza, we usually do a vertical tasting or old vintage tasting with Luis, which is the best. It is so much fun to taste with these wines.
We have been doing a lot of Malbec and Cabernet Sauvignon. We have to make one with Pinot Noir.
Yes, 100%. Oh my gosh. And then we get to taste a Luis of 10 years ago and then a Luis of today. It's very much your own evolution is in the bottle too, Luis.
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't mention one thing. These lots, the G lots in Gualtallary, these are organic certified. We have been certified organic. They are sustainable certified, all the Luca wines, but specifically these 2 lots are organic. And I think we are moving more and more into the organic farming. I'm not convinced to make what people call natural wines. And the reason is that when you open a bottle of Luca, older vintages or new vintages, you will find always very clean wines. You will be not surprised with gas or turbidity or other or VA. I mean, these wines, I respect a lot the consumer. As I told you at the beginning, I mean, this is my job, but I feel it like my hobby, something I love to do. But we are very professional at the same time. I mean, we want to make a wine that is better every year. Of course, you have variation of the vintages, but better and better every year. And when the people get a bottle of Luca, pull out the cork, pour the wine in the glass, they feel pleasure, and they feel that the money they spend, they got much more pleasure and quality when they drink the wine. So we are very respectful with the people that is buying our wines.
It shows. I think when people taste Luca for the first time, they are Luca fans for life, and they keep coming back to find Luca, and they find the bottles that are their favorites. It's a beautiful packaging. It's a beautiful story. They present so well, and I think they've represented the premium tier for Argentina since the beginning, since 20 years ago. And Luis, we could talk about so many things for so long. But I think as we wrap up here, I would love to hear just in general, from your experience making wine in Mendoza, making wine today in Mendoza, what are you the most excited about in the next stages for Mendoza and its wine culture in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the last step we did was to explore more and more the soils and understand better when to pick the grapes. I think we have pretty clear that, but we have more and more we do research and we try different things. More and more we understand that we know a little. Like there is always room to make better wine. Parcelization with the diversity of soils we have has been something that gave us very good results. With Luca Syrah, I think I could make a better wine. I want to make a better Luca Syrah. You know, Syrah, especially from the northern Rhone Valley, Côte-Rôtie, Cornas, Hermitage. all those appellations in the northern Rhone are maybe my favorite reds, also with Pinot Noir. But if I want to have a more muscular red, I like those. And it's, at the end, it's Syrah, a variety that in the world has been left in the side, like Merlot. You can make great wines with Merlot, you can make great wines with Syrah. Just to find the right place, how to manage the vineyard, when you pick the grape. So there's always room to make better wine, and it's something where I have been working. Then, I also make La Posta. We are trying to start La Posta organic wine. And moving to more organic and sustainable farming and production in general. So I think that I see Argentina, I think, and there are more and more winemakers making great wine here. Even when you go to the supermarket and now with the quarantine, I try to do like a benchmark, and I bought like very inexpensive white wine. And the wines are good.
Yeah.
Some wines, Chenin Blanc, and so I think Argentina is in a very good position today. In the past, I think we used to make, not me personally, but as a country, with this fashion of Malbec, making overripe Malbec with a lot of oak, and people is moving away from that here, like respecting more the place, having more care with the oak, and making better wines. So it's.
I think it's so well
you
said.
will see in the future.
Yeah, no, I'm brainstorming as you're speaking, Luis, because you're so spot on. I think the phrase is, you think you know, but you have no idea. I think that encapsulates what people's perception of Argentina or Mendoza is at this point. Maybe we should make T-shirts that say that. We can brainstorm, but really, I think it's understanding Argentina, Mendoza to the next level of detail is the next experience for wine professionals, for wine lovers, and I think the more people taste the wines from today and from your generation of winemakers, the more they're going to realize that, oh my gosh, we're only dipping a toe into what the potential and the capacity of this wine region is. And Gualtallary is an example of that, and multiply that by many different vineyard areas in the region. Luis, you are an absolute gem. I always love speaking with you. You teach me everything.
Me too.
All the time.
Me too.
I would say
I'm very happy, and I love to talk with you. It's very familiar.
It's pura familia.
Yeah.
I think we have so much more to discuss and to share with the market and the industry here. So consider this the first chapter of many. And
Okay.
we have more Luca and more La Posta to chat about. So Luis, thank you so much for your time. I miss you. I can't wait to see you soon.
Yeah, well, we will have the old vintages of Pinot Noir.
Yes.
When you come next time.
That is my carrot.
You will be happy.
Get the asado ready, get the parrilla hot, and get the Pinot ready, and I can't wait. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will see you next time, and cheers to you, Luis. Salud.
Cheers. Salud. And thanks.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye-bye.